She doesn't remember deciding to pull the trigger. One moment, the crosshairs are floating just ahead of the machine gunner's cheek, drifting with his breathing. The next, the rifle bucks into her shoulder with a muffled crack, and the man on the ledge folds in on himself like his strings have been cut. The gun jerks, barrel kicking up. The belt of ammunition slips from the feed tray and spills into the snow with a hiss of tumbling brass. The steady soar of fire that's been buzzing in her bones drops by half. For about 2 heartbeats, nobody else is shooting. Then the other weapons compensate. Fire from the opposite ridge intensifies, chewing the snow around the dead gun, hammering at the side of the second truck instead. Bullets smack into the road surface in angry, sparking lines. Mara cycles the bolt by feel, never lifting her cheek from the stock. Empty casing out, fresh round in, a tiny metallic heartbeat. "Come on," she murmurs, eyes in the scope. From this angle, she can see bodies moving behind the remaining machine guns, shapes hunched in snow camouflaged by branches and white sheets. She can see the crew by the heavy weapons struggling to reline it after losing their teammate. But she can't see the sled-mounted jammer. It sits too low behind its berm, hiding in a fold of terrain. The rifle barks again. Another figure on the same ledge jerks, then drops, rolling until he vanishes behind a rock. The machine gun coughs a few last rounds as the assistant gunner's hand spasms on the grip, then goes still. "Someone's working them over," a voice yelled from the second truck, ragged with hope. Mara's position is terrible. The drift she's using as cover shields her from direct line of sight, but it also traps her. From here she's shooting up at steep angles, forced to work through narrow windows in the rock. Her own field of view is a keyhole while the enemy's is a panoramic balcony. Through the scope she hauls her gaze across the pass, hunting. There, on the left side, above the rear truck, a cluster of figures hauling a longer, heavier barrel into place. Crew served. Their arc will intersect with the entire convoy in a clean, brutal sweep. She shifts, burying her elbow deeper into the snow. The cold bites through her sleeve with needle teeth. She ignores it. She steadies on the gun team. One round. The loader drops with a blossom of red against white. The others flinch but don't scatter. They are trained. They know they are exposed, but they are too close to bringing the weapon online to back out now. She takes another. The man grasping the tripod's leg jerks backward. The whole assembly lurches, one leg kicking out, and the barrel swings away from the road. She hopes someone in the trucks is using those seconds. A round smacks into the drift just inches from her face, spraying her with ice crystals. Another punches into the rock near her elbow, sending a shock through her bones. Someone on the ridgeline has spotted the faint signature of her muzzle flash or caught a sliver of movement. She pulls her head back for a fraction of a second, heart hammering. Snow caving above her, dusting her hair, sliding down the back of her neck like cold fingers. From inside the lead truck, the platoon leader shouts something she can't quite catch. It sounds like her name, stretched thin with urgency. "Sergeant Iqbal," he yells again, louder. "We're not holding this. They'll breach the middle vehicle in minutes." She knows what he means. The armor's tough, but nothing is invincible. Enough explosives, enough concentrated fire, and the steel case with its encrypted guts will be exposed to whoever's left alive to grab it. Her current spot is a bandage on a severed artery. She can knock out a gun team here, a rifleman there. She might even get a lucky shot on one of the officers, the ones waving their arms more than the others. But the angles are wrong. She can't see the jammer. She can't see the full depth of the enemy positions. She needs height. Real height. She risks a glance over the drift, eyes squinting against the ice-laden wind. Above, the pass walls loom. On the right, sheer rock. On the left, a steep, jagged slope of snow and broken stone that looks almost vertical until she notices a faint dark seam cutting up through it, a narrow chute where winter avalanches have carved a channel. It isn't a path, not in any sane sense. But it's climbable. Maybe. If you don't mind the possibility of falling 100 meters and turning into a red smear on white. Her memory supplies the ghost of another chute, another climb. The crunch of a different set of boots behind her. The shouted warning that came an instant too late. She pushes it aside. She has no bandwidth left for ghosts. The platoon leader crawls as far toward the open door as he dares. Tell me you've got a plan, Mara. She swallows. Her mouth is dry, her tongue thick. From here I can slow them down, she calls back, keeping her voice steady. That's it. That's not good enough. I know, she says. There's a chute on the left wall. If I can get up it, there's a shelf near the top. It should see everything. Shit, he barks. I've seen it on imagery. She doesn't know that she's seen it in nightmares, too. Down here, we die tired. Up there, we might not die at all. A buzz slaps into the truck's hood, inches from his head. He ducks, curses, and drags himself back inside. You'll be alone up there, he shouts, voice muffled by metal. No support. No comms. Down here, too, she mutters. Then louder. Give me 10 minutes, sir. If I'm not making a difference by then, well, you won't have to worry about it. It's gallows humor, but he hears the iron underneath. He hesitates. For half a second, she thinks he's going to order her to stay. To keep plinking from a bad angle because at least she's doing something. To choose the illusion of safety over the very real chance of a better position. When he speaks again, his voice has changed. Some part of him has caught up with the reality of who she is and what this situation demands. Go, he says. Take the marksman's spare mags. And come back. There's no time for thanks. She rolls further down the slope, using the drift as cover until she hits the edge of its protection. Beyond that, she's naked to the ridgelines until she reaches the base of the chute. She times it in her head, waiting for a lull in the nearest machine gun bursts. When it comes, she sprints. Snow grabs at her boots, sucking them down. She drives through it, body low, feeling rounds snap through the air in her wake. A chunk of ice explodes just to her left, pelting her with stinging fragments. She doesn't look back. The base of the chute is a scraped patch of rough rock where snow has refused to settle. From up close, the groove running up the wall looks steeper than it did from the road. She slams her rifles but into a crack to anchor it for a second, uses it like a climbing tool, and hauls herself onto the first ledge. Her gloved fingers find holds in the rock, blue knuckles straining. Her boots scuff for purchase on slick spots where ice covers everything in a glassy sheen. Behind her, a different rifle cracks. Stone chips fly past her head. Someone has noticed the strange shape moving up the wall. She ducks instinctively. As she does, another round hits the rock just above her optic. There's a screech of metal on stone, and when she pulls the rifle closer to check, her stomach drops. The protective glass over the scope is a spiderweb of fine fractures. There's a cloudy smear across the center where impact energy turned glass to powder. Through it, the world is doubled and blurred. Damn it, she breathes. She doesn't have the luxury of cursing for long. A shot sizzles so close that she feels the heat of friction on her cheek, a phantom warmth in this deep freeze. She presses herself into the rock, heart slamming. This is it, she thinks. This is exactly how it went last time. Climb toward a hopeless angle until something breaks under you. Last time, it wasn't the glass. She's already moving before the memory fully forms, hands stripping the damaged optic off the rifle with practiced efficiency. The mounting screws are stiff and cold. Her fingers go numb at the tips. She fumbles one, nearly dropping the whole assembly into the void below. Not this time, she mutters, jaw tight. Under the primary scope, the rifle still wears a backup, a simpler, low-magnification sight-mounted offset, meant for closer engagements. Not designed for reaching out across entire valleys. Not perfect. Better than blind. She clicks it into place as best she can, cinching down screws with gloved fingertips, feeling for the subtle bite of metal on metal. It's a compromise she hates. It's also survival. Snow starts to fall harder as she climbs, the light turning flat and diffuse. What had been crisp edges and clear lines become smudged. The ridgelines blur into the sky. Even the muzzle flashes become faint, ghostly flickers. The storm doesn't care about their perfect kill box or encrypted modules. It doesn't care about sights. Visibility dropping, she notes. Advantage and disadvantage, depending on who can work in the mic. Her ascent turns into a steady, brutal rhythm. Hook the rifle's muzzle over a lip, pull up. He'll stomp into a pocket of snow until it compresses enough to bear her weight. Lean into the slope, chest almost scraping it, breath fogging the rock inches from her nose. Her thighs burn. Her shoulders ache. Sweat trickles down her back and chills instantly under her armor, an ice water line that makes her teeth chatter. Once, she slips. The snow under her left foot gives way with a soft sigh, and for an instant gravity wins. Her stomach lurches as she slides. Her right hand snatches for a protruding ridge, fingers screaming as they catch it. The rifle swings free, dangling by its sling, smacking against the rock. She hangs there, boots scrabbling for purchase, breath jammed in her throat. A different memory overlays the moment. Another hand grasping for hers, glove rough against glove. The weight of a full-grown person yanking her shoulder out of its socket as they hung over emptiness together. "Don't let go," he'd said, voice cracking. She hadn't wanted to. Her body had wanted to. Muscles screaming, fingers peeling back one by one. The rock under her boots had crumbled, sending little avalanches down. In the end, physics had made the choice. The scream as he fell had cut off quickly. The sound of his rifle bouncing down the cliff had gone on much longer. She drags herself back into the present, nails digging into stone even through the gloves. Her hand finds a new purchase. Her boots dig into a fresh patch of ice. Inch by inch, she hauls herself back onto the chute. "Breathe," she tells herself. "Count it." She does. One inhale, one exhale. Each step gets a number. Each number is further away from that other ridge and closer to the one she needs now. Below, the firefight continues. It's muffled now, distance and snow swallowing some of the sound, but each base still sends vibrations up the stone, a distant thunder in her bones. Halfway up, she finds a shallow alcove, barely big enough to shelter her shoulders from the wind. She collapses into it, chest heaving. Her fingers have lost most of their feeling. When she peels back a glove to check, the skin at her fingertips is white, the nails blanched. The pass looks smaller from here. The vehicles are toy models, the men and women specks moving between them. Muzzle flashes are almost quaint, like flashbulbs at some nightmare press conference. She could stay here. She could shoot from this spot, take a few targets of opportunity, maybe buy them a few more minutes. It wouldn't be enough. Above, she can see the lip of a shelf jutting out, narrow but long, almost like a natural firing platform. From that vantage, she'll be looking down into the heart of the enemy positions. She'll see the jammer, the heavy guns, the flanking teams. She'll be able to pick apart the spine of the ambush instead of trimming its fingertips. Her heart flips in her chest, a weird echo of that old fay. Another mirrored ridge. Another decision point. Last time she'd pushed, her team had followed. One hadn't made it back. This time, she's alone. Nobody else will fall if she slips. That thought helps. A little. "Up," she whispers, pushing herself out of the alcove. The wind steals the word, tossing it aside. She climbs. By the time she reaches the shelf, her muscles feel carved from frozen wood. Each move is mechanical now, an automatic sequence driven by habit instead of conscious intent. Hook, pull, step, drive. She flops onto the lip with less grace than she'd like, chest pressed between cold rock and colder air. For a moment she just lies there, letting the stone leach heat from her while her lungs try to catch up. Then she rolls onto her side and looks. The view hits her like a physical force. From here, the pass is a diagram come to life. She sees the whole L-shaped choke, the three vehicles wedged into its crook, the river of snow around them. She sees the enemy positions, suddenly obverse, machine gun nests scooped into the snow along the upper ridges, rifle pits dug behind boulders, a network of footpaths carved into the slopes connecting them all. The sled-mounted jammer squats behind its berm, a hunk of metal and cables, its antenna cutting a neat silhouette against the white. A fighter crouches beside it, one eye on a small display. She can see the heavy guns emplacement on the mid-level ledge, the flanking team moving along a lower path to try to get behind the convoy, the command node where a man with a headset gestures and points, directing arcs of fire like a conductor. She can see everything. Okay, she breathes. Okay. She presses flat, belly to rock, and slides the rifle forward until the barrel extends just past the edge. The backup sight gives her less magnification than she'd like, but with this vantage in the bright, high-contrast world, she can work with that. She rests the rifle on a small pack, building a stable platform out of necessity and stubbornness. The snow bites her elbows. The wind tugs at her beanie. The cold tries to get in. She doesn't let it. Below, a trio of enemy fighters has broken off, moving along the lower path with purpose. One carries something on his back that's wrong for a simple pack. Too rigid, too tube-shaped. Launcher, reapproach, using the terrain to get below the convoy's firing arcs. She files them away for later. First, she needs to build her ladder. Her brain shifts into a different gear, one it hasn't used at full speed since before that other ridge. All right, think like a sniper, not like a skate intel sergeant. You've got maybe 20, 30 rounds you can really count on. Less, if the mags took any knocks. You can't kill everyone. You don't have to. You just need to break the machine. She maps it mentally. Who makes this ambush deadly, not just dangerous? First wrong. Whoever's watching for exactly what she's doing. Counter-sniper or designated marksman. The one who can spot her flash and zero in. Without him, she buys herself time. Second wrong. The machine guns with line of sight that pin her people in place. They control movement. Kill them, and the convoy can start to shift to claw tiny advantages out of the geometry. Third wrong. The jammer operator and his gear. Without comms, they are alone. With comms, they are part of something bigger again. Fourth rung, the flanking team. Let them close, and all the overwatch in the world won't matter once grenades start coming in from behind. Fifth, command and control. The man with the map and the headset. Take him out, and the timing that's making this so precise will stutter. After that, whatever round she has left are just triage. Deny the enemy anything heavy. Deter pursuit when support finally arrives. The plan settles over her like a familiar coat. She hadn't realized how much she missed the weight of this sort of clarity until it's back. She doesn't think the word unstoppable. That's something other people will say later. Right now, she's just very, very focused. She finds the counter-sniper first. He's not the guy with the biggest rifle. He's the one who's not firing much at all, scanning instead, his barrel sweeping, his position slightly set back from the line. Smart. If rest of them get hit, he's supposed to survive long enough to make the killer pay. She tracks his scope as it moves. When it pauses at one of her old positions down by the drift, she knows he's about to realize that the threat has moved. She doesn't give him the chance. The reticle settles behind his ear as he leans to glass another sector. She lets a breath roll out slow, pressuring the trigger at the bottom of the exhale. The rifle speaks. Down below, the man drops. His weapon clatters against the rock and slides a few feet before getting hung up on a boot. She cycles the bolt, listening for any change in the rhythm of the enemy fire. There is one. It's subtle, but she hears it. Less confident. Sloppier. Nobody left up there whose job is to be patient and punishing. Second rung. Machine gun, right side. She picks the one with its barrel already swinging toward the convoy's center, belching red flame. From above, she can see the gunner's helmeted head and the assistant hunched over the belt. The snow wall in front of them is high enough to hide their torsos, but heads, shoulders, and hands are exposed. She aims at the seam where helmet meets collar. Another gentle press. Another crack. The helmet jumps, the man underneath crumples. The assistant gapes, hands frozen over the feed. She doesn't shoot him right away. He's already valuable. He hesitates, buying her seconds. When he does go for the grip out of reflex, she drops him too, almost regretfully. The gun goes still. Its silence broadcasts itself like a beacon. Now the jammer. She swings her aim toward the sled. The operator there is on one knee, half behind the metal box, eyes flicking between the small screen and the distant shapes of the convoy. He's counting on distance and deception to protect him. She shifts slightly, feeling the subtle give of the shelf underneath her. The snow up here is wind-hardened, crust on top, powder beneath. She'll need to remember that. The sight picture is fuzzier without the big glass. The target is smaller. The wind is gusting across the face of the pass, carrying fine flakes. But the advantages she has, height, top-down angle, their overconfidence, tilt the odds enough. She holds just off the center of his chest, letting the wind and distance compress the error. Press. The round lands lower than she'd like, slamming into the jammer's casing near his ribs. The man jerks sideways, crying out, clutching at a torn flank as he pitches into the snow. The box itself shudders, one side panel bent inward. A second later, in the trucks far below, the omnipresent hiss in everyone's ears drops in pitch for a heartbeat. "Did you hear that?" the young corporal blurts, tapping his headset. "Sir, I think, did you hear that? I got a blip." Say again, say again." Static surges, then dips again, uneven. "It's not enough. Not yet." Mara lines up on the damaged device itself this time. She finds the point where the antenna bolts into the metal housing. It's a delicate shot, but the worst that happens if she misses is more broken hardware. She squeezes the trigger. The round hits the junction in a puff of sparks. The antenna jerks, half sheared off, then slumps at an awkward angle. In the convoy, the hiss collapses into a jittery crackle. Iron 1. This is base actual. We're reading partial. A voice bleeds through, chopped by interference but undeniably real. Base actual. This is Iron 1. Contact. Troops in the open. Grid. The platoon leader fires words into the net like they are bullets. Up on a mid-level ledge, the enemy commander hears the change. He sees it too. Fighters looking around sharply as their radios spit unintended voices, the sudden loss of clean control over comms. He reacts fast. The best do. He barks orders, pointing up toward the upper slopes. A pair of fighters nod and break away, cutting across a narrow path that leads toward Mara's ridge. At the same time, he waves over a man carrying a compact quadcopter in a sling bag. Their conversation is brief and sharp. The drone operator nods, fingers already working at hatch latches. Mara catches the movement in her peripheral vision. She jerks the sight over just in time to see the drone's rotors spin up, kicking snow in a ring. It lifts, wobbles, then steadies, rising like a mechanical hornet. Her teeth clamp down. If that thing gets enough altitude, she's exposed. Her shelf is narrow and offers almost no overhead cover. Once they have eyes on, all they need to do is flood this slice of rock with rounds and mortar fire until she's gone. She checks her magazines mentally. She's been counting without realizing it. She knows how many shots she's taken. She knows how many she has left. She can afford to waste exactly 0. "Drone or flanking team," she whispers, eyes flicking between the growing speck in the sky and the 3 figures on the lower path edging closer to the convoy's rear. "You can't be everywhere. Except, sometimes, you can approximate it." She chooses the drone. She tracks it as it climbs, spinning lazily, the operators down below bent over their handheld screen. The drone buzzes higher, crossing in front of a darker band of rock. That's a window. Against pure sky, it's a pale blur. Against stone, its shape sharpens. She waits, breath held. Timing is everything. The second the drone's body passes in front of that dark strip, she fires. The little machine detonates in a puff of shrapnel and plastic confetti. Its pieces spin off, trailing thin smoke, before vanishing into the snowstorm. Down on the ledge, the operator cries out and flings the useless controller aside. Mara does not watch it fall. She's already back on her ladder. The flanking team is halfway to a position from which they can fire down into the convoy's unarmored rear. From above, their path is a thin scar slanting upward. The man with the launcher is easy to pick out now. The way he balances his weight, the extra bulk over his shoulder. She takes the point man first, the one choosing where their next footfalls land. 1 second he's there, the next he's tumbling, sliding down the path, taking loose snow and confidence with him. The 2 behind him flinch, flattening instinctively. She shifts to the man with the tube. He's scrambling for cover, hands reaching instinctively. "You heard the man," he shouts, slapping the nearest shoulder. "Smoke out. Markers. Make it ugly for the flyboys." Colored smoke blooms along the road, thick clouds of red and purple and yellow swirling into the snowstorm. It turns the pass into a surreal painting, white and gray smeared with violent colors. Mara, watching from above, uses the cover of the smoke and thickening snowfall to send her last few rounds into any enemy who looks like is thinking of rallying. She's not just shooting now. She's shepherding. Nudge here. Deter there. Break that one's nerve so he decides to run instead of fire. When she finally hits bolt lock and finds her last magazine empty, she lets the rifle rest. Her fingers are shaking, not from adrenaline in them all, but from exhaustion and cold. Her whole body is buzzing with a distant, hollow fatigue. Down below, the soundscape changes. The constant stuttering roar of small arms is joined by a deeper growl, the rotors of helicopters, the scream of jets at altitude. Support is arriving, fashionably late but very much present. The first rockets streak in a heartbeat later, carving bright trails through the thick air. They slam into the upper ridge lines, tearing open enemy positions in eruptions of fire and rock. Snow cascades, billowing into the pass, burying pits and trenches under metric tons of white. Enemy fighters break. Some drop their weapons and raise their hands. Others run, slipping and sliding down slopes, their footsteps erased almost instantly by fresh snow. A few, the most stubborn or the most trapped, keep firing until they are silenced by overwhelming force. Up on her shelf, Mara shields her face from the shock waves, feeling the rock tremble under her. The mountain grumbles but holds. When the worst of the impacts fade and only scattered gunshots and shouted commands remain, she raises her head. The world is a haze of smoke, steam, and drifting flakes. The convoy is still there, bruised, battered, missing chunks of armor. But there, she allows herself one long breath, in and out. For the first time since the ambush started, she lets her shoulders sag. The climb down is harder than going up. Her muscles are spent. Her hands barely close around holds. Twice she misjudges a foothold and slips, scratching skin off knuckles and leaving smears of her own blood on the rock. By the time she reaches the base, she's shaking so hard she can barely keep her knees under her. The first person she sees up close is the young corporal from the radio. He's standing outside the lead truck, headset askew, hands still white from clenching the handset. When he recognizes her, something like awe and guilt mix on his face. "You," he starts, voice cracking. "Sergeant, were you?" She gives him a tired half-smile. "You get comms back?" she asks instead. He nods, swallowing. Yeah, we did. Good." She pats his shoulder as she slides past him into the truck. The marksman lies where they'd left him, only now there's an forced start in his arm and a pressure dressing on his chest. His breathing is thin but regular. "You owe me your rifle," she tells him, more out of habit than anything. He'd laugh at that, if he were awake. Medical evac birds arrive first, hovering like predatory insects over the makeshift landing zone scraped out at the widest part of the pass. They winch out the worst of the wounded, attaching them to dangling stretchers that swing gently in the downwash. The dead are laid in a straight, neat line off to the side, boots aligned, faces covered. No one talks much while that's happening. Later, as the last of the enemy positions are cleared and the QRF confirms no more shooters on the ridge, Mara stands at the edge of the road and looks down into the valley. The shelf she'd been on is invisible from here. Even knowing where to look, she can't pick it out. The angles hide it. The snow hides it. It might as well not exist. If she hadn't climbed, no one would ever know it was there. Back at the base, hours later, the snow has started again. This time it's gentle, soft flakes drifting straight down instead of being hurled by wind. The mountains loom in the distance, indifferent. In a cramped briefing room, the air smells of wet wool and stale coffee. A space heater rattles in the corner. A handful of officers sit around a table, some in clean uniforms, others still dusted with dried mud and powder burns. Mara sits near the end, back straight despite the ache in her shoulders. On the table, a laptop displays captured helmet cam footage and drone wrecking clips. A small steel case, the data module, rests beside it, its biometric lock still sealed, the indicator light a steady, reassuring green. Let's start with what they wanted, the intelligence officer says, tapping the case with a pen. This module contains two primary datasets, the identities and last known locations of all local sources we've recruited in this sector, and the coordinates for the new sensor grid we're planning to deploy along the border. He flips to a slide showing blurred faces and dots on a map. If they'd gotten this, they'd have had a ready-made kill list for our informants and a map to every new set of eyes and ears we're trying to install. Military advantage and a propaganda coup, all in one. A murmur goes around the table. Nobody likes thinking about what could have happened. Everybody does, anyway. Based on patches recovered from bodies and the gear they were using, another officer adds, we assessed this was a proxy special operations unit, not regular insurgents. They were testing our response time and our reliance on that pass. They knew our schedule. They knew our standard convoy composition. Silence stretches for a beat at that. The implication hangs in the air. Schedule knowledge doesn't just fall from the sky. Surveillance, the platoon leader suggests, voice rough. They've been watching our patterns. Pattern of life analysis is definitely part of it, the intel officer says. But there are gaps we can't explain yet. We'll dig. For now, what matters is they failed. He clicks another key. Helmet cam footage fills the screen, jerky but legible. The view from somewhere in the convoy during the ambush. Snow, muzzle flashes, shouted curses. Then, jarringly crisp, the moment the RPG detonates in its own tube, a fireball blossoming out of nowhere. Pause there, the commander says, leaning forward. Back it up. Highlight that shot. They do. Frame by frame. The bullet can be seen ticking into the rocket body, a tiny dark smudge preceding catastrophe. Who took that? Someone asks. Heads turn, almost as one, toward Mara. She feels heat rise under her skin and squashes it quickly. I was on the left side of the road at that point, she says simply. That's where the marksman went down. We've reviewed your helmet cam and the others, the commander says. Also drone footage from the QF, what little we have of it. You got up onto that ridge alone, disabled a jammer, killed multiple machine gun crews and their sniper, broke a flanking team, and neutralized their commander while under indirect fire. His tone is measured, like he's reading off a grocery list. The effect is anything but casual. Across the table, the young specialist from the range sits with his arm in a sling, a bandage peeking from under his collar. He looks like he's been awake for days. He also looks like he's seeing Mara for the first time. He starts, then stops. Sergeant, I didn't know you. Most people don't read the board in the armory, she says, more lightly than she feels. That's on them. The commander's gaze sharpens. That brings me to another point, he says. Sergeant Iqbal, your pre-mission notes on the past geometry and your observations about tracks and shaped snow positions were briefed and annotated. Then they were downplayed. By me. He doesn't look away when he says it, which she respects. Sir, He cuts her off with a raised hand. I'm not looking for you to absolve me, Sergeant. I'm stating for the record that you saw indicators. You logged them. We didn't adjust based on your assessment. That won't happen again. That lands heavier than any praise could. Someone at the far end of the table clears a throat. If you saw all that, why didn't you push harder? He asks, not unkindly. You had a case. You had evidence. She swallows. This is the part she hates more than any firefight. Because the last time I pushed hard, she says slowly, I was wrong. And people died doing what I told them to. The room quiets in a different way now, attention tightening. She stays at her hands clasped on the table. The knuckles are scraped raw. Her nails are edged with ingrained dirt from the climb. Different valley, different ridge, she says. We had incomplete intel. I saw some signs I thought pointed to a hidden cache. I argued aggressively to send a team up there, under bad weather, on a tight timeline. I convinced the commander to trust my gut. We went. She doesn't describe the fall, the scream, the way the world had shrunk to the weight of the end of her arm and the slow betrayal of her own grip. The sharp crack when rope snapped against rock. The sudden, stunned silence afterward. She doesn't have to. Some things are loud, even unspoken. I lost one of my spotters, she says instead. He fell out on a limb I told him was safe. Officially, it was labeled an operational risk inherent to terrain. Unofficially, every time I looked at his bunk, I remembered that I pushed. My conviction put him there. She looks up, meeting the commander's eyes. I came here and asked for a desk, she finishes. Figured somebody else could take the big swings. I just make sure their maps were aligned and their batteries charged. Nobody rushes to fill the silence. It's thick, but not hostile. Finally, the commander nods, just once. Today, you took a big swing again, he says. Difference is, you were right this time. And you were the one climbing, not sending someone else. He glances at the other officer to his left. Recommendation. The man clears his throat, glancing at a folder. Reinstate Sergeant Iqbal to the long gun roster as primary overwatch for this sector, he says. Effective immediately. And maybe, his lips twitch, just slightly, find room for her on the instructor rotation for the range. All eyes slide back to her. She hadn't thought about what came after this. Survive the pass, get the wounded home, maybe sleep sometime next week. That's as far as she'd let herself go. The idea of stepping back into a formal sniper role is both like slipping into an old jacket and like revisiting a burn. Her instinct is to flinch away, to say no, to go back to the intel room, where the worst thing that can happen is a paper cut and a wrong line on a report. But she remembers the way the specialist's hand shook when he held the rifle the day before, the way she'd watched him teach, earnest but limited, the way the mountain had nearly eaten them all because they treated the pass like a highway instead of a weapon. If I say yes, she says slowly, it's on one condition. The commander raises an eyebrow. Name it. I go back to the range, she says. Not just once. Regularly. I want to teach them to read the snow the way I do. To see shape and shadow. To understand that maps are suggestions and terrain is law. I'm not interested in being the only one who can pull something like this off. There's a beat. Then the commander nods. Done, he says. We'll put it in writing. The briefing breaks up in clumps, people drifting out to their respective tasks. Investigations, reports, letters to families. The work that comes after violence, quieter but no less heavy. The specialist lingers near the doorway, fidgeting with his sling. Sergeant, he says as she stands. About the other day, about me running my mouth. She offers him a small, tired smile. You weren't wrong, she says. I do spend a lot of time with spreadsheets. He flushes. Still, if you're teaching now, I'd like to be in that class. You already are, she says. You just don't know it yet. Snow falls gently on the firing range a few days later, flakes spinning lazily in the air. The berms are piled higher now, fresh plow lines cutting packets of cleared ground through the drifts. Steel targets stand in the distance like small, stubborn ghosts. A line of soldiers lies prone under the shelter's overhang, rifles tucked into their shoulders, eyes squinting through optics. Their breath plumes in unison. Winds from your right, Mara calls out as she walks behind them, hands clasped behind her back. Quarter value at most. Don't overcorrect. Snow's denser near the ground this morning. See the way it clings to the brush at 300? That'll slow rounds more than you think. The specialist with the sling, arm now in a lighter bandage, lies at the far end of the line, tongue poking out the corner of his mouth as he tries to center his reticle on the 600-meter plate. Relax your grip, she says, crouching beside him. You're choking the rifle. Look downrange. What do you see? Target at 6, he says. Slight rise between here and there. Snow drifted heavier just past 400. And that little notch in the rock behind the plate makes it look lower than it is. She nods. Good. Remember that. Rifles don't shoot on paper. They shoot in places. Every place lies a little differently. Let me. She reaches out and nudges the toe of his boot an inch, straightening his spine. Adjusts the set of his cheek on the stock. Straightens the fingers of his support hand so the tension runs into his forearm instead of his wrist. Better, she says. Now, breathe. Let the shot surprise you. He inhales, exhales. Finger squeezes, slow and steady. The rifle cracks. In the distance, the steel at 600 jumps and rings, a clear, satisfying note that cuts through the cold. He lifts his head, blinking, then breaks into a grin. I hit it, he says, as if it might still be in doubt. You did, she agrees. He looks at her, the grin dimming into something more thoughtful. You, still want me to teach you sometime? He asks, echoing his old joke half awkwardly, half genuine. She snorts softly. How about we call it even, she says. Then, after a beat, with a small, crooked smile. Actually, no. Let me teach you to shoot. He laughs, this time without any edge of mockery, and nods. The others on the line adjust slightly, listening without pretending not to. As the day wears on, the sound of rifles comes in regular, disciplined cadence. Shots ring steel at various distances. Voices call out corrections and praise. The snow continues to fall, filling old footprints even as new ones are made. Later, as the sun dips behind the ridgeline and the range goes quiet, Mara walks to the far edge of the base. From there, she can see the valley where the ambush took place. It looks peaceful, distance and weather having smoothed over the violence. You wouldn't know, looking at it now, what it took to keep 3 vehicles from becoming tombs. You wouldn't know how close a metal box full of secrets came to changing the fate of a dozen families and an entire region's worth of informants. That's fine, she thinks. Most of the world doesn't need to know. She leans on the railing, breath fogging in the cold air. In the back of her mind, a voice she hasn't heard in a long time speaks, warm and teasing. Still dragging us up bad routes, it says. At least this time you fell alone. She doesn't answer it out loud. She just lets the thought sit, the memory of her fallen partner a familiar ache rather than an open wound. We did better this time, she thinks back, not sure who she's addressing. Him, herself, the mountain. I did better. Down on the range, someone has left a steel target hanging. It sways slightly in the evening breeze, catching the last light. The marks on its surface are clustered tight in the center, a constellation of small, dark circles that testify to time, effort, and quiet competence. Her story won't get a parade. There will be paperwork, probably a ceremony later where some colonel she's never met pins something on her chest while cameras click. The enemy will, somewhere in some other cold valley, review their own footage and try to figure out what went wrong. How a single rifle on an impossible angle broke their carefully laid plan. Maybe someday they'll come back, change tactics and new gear in tow. Maybe they'll test the pass again. Mountains rarely get only one war written on them. If they do, she hopes there's someone on one of these ranges who has learned to read the snow's lies the way she has. Someone quiet, overlooked, who sees the geometry of danger where others see a simple road. The best shots, she reflects, are the ones nobody ever really hears about. Not the crack of the bullet leaving the barrel, not the impact, just the silence afterward where something terrible did not happen. Behind her, the bass hums on, generators rumbling, voices calling, boots crunching on ice. Lives continuing in their small, stubborn ways. She pushes off the railing and heads back toward the lights, leaving only her footprints and the faint echo of steel ringing in the snowy air.